mysteries, hidden history, and the unexplained. Join William Collinson and Lee Strydom on Strange and Mysterious World.
And welcome to Season 3, Episode 20 of Strange and Mysterious World. Tonight's our regular guest, Father Urbani from the Liberal Catholic Church. And we're going to be chatting about the Gospels of Thomas, the Lost Gospels of Thomas, which is actually, I've been listening to it over the last few days, Will, and I must say there's some heavy stuff in there, man. It's like really cool stuff.
Yeah. I've also started listening to them, but I didn't get through as much as you did. Well, I mean, the audiobook I got was most of it's commentary, but it was very interesting, the commentary. And it's just apparently it's the most important gospel. It's actually the true teachings of Jesus, and it was taken out of the Council of Nicaea, took it out of the whole conglomeration of what the Bible is today. And I would love to find out from Damon, Father Urbani, why it was heretical. Even if it's claimed to be the true teachings of Jesus, why is it out of the Bible? What was the big fuss about it? Because people say it's the most important gospel that was written, but it's not in the Bible.
But you must also remember, so look, these books, although they probably got rid of them at the Council of Nicaea, you must remember who was in charge at the time. What's Emperor Constantine? So he was trying to push his own agenda, where they were trying to where Jesus was trying to teach people to look within themselves to find God within the kingdom of God. They didn't want that. They wanted, it's a completely different story. If you go look at the Gospel of Mary, if you go look at all the other Gospels, the Gospel of Mary, according to that side of the things, Mary seemed to be the number one disciple. She was like Jesus' number one disciple. And she actually went back after the death because hey, what's that?
I'm sure they had a lot of pillow talk, like after they had a...
Well, look, whether or not that's true, we don't know. But the thing is, she was the first to see him after death. She was the first to see him after he had died. He was the one that told her to go and get the group of people together. So she was very influential in the thing. And if you look at her gospel, she's actually a very, very prominent member in Jesus's group. You know what I mean? So, and they did away with that because they don't want that. If you go back in those times, that was frowned upon. Women are not seen as equals. It was a way lesser thing. So they kept that stuff out. And, as God says, you take away from the book that I give you, I'll take away from your treasure. You add to it, I'll add to your punishment. So, yeah, let's see what happens, man.
They could also just said that to control the narrative as well. Okay, cool. Well, here he is. Let's get him in.
Hello, how are you?
Fine, and you?
Excellent.
Good, man.
Hello,
so we
Father
were
Dan.
just talking a little bit about the your favorite book, the Lost Gospel of Thomas.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we because I've been listening to Greg Braden's version on YouTube, and he's kind of explaining as it goes along. It was very, very interesting. I mean, a lot of the stuff that he was saying and trying to explain what Jesus was meaning at the times, it was really, really insightful, a lot of the stuff. But in saying that, there's a question that I have for you, which maybe I'll bring on a little bit later.
Let's ask Father Urbani, what is the Gospel of Thomas? And
okay, so the Gospel of Thomas is something that was known about right from the earliest time of the church, and we know that because St. Irenaeus, one of the early church fathers before Christianity was accepted by the Roman Empire, refers to it, and he refers to a number of these later term Gnostic Gospels, and he attacks them, and they were actually wiped out. So we knew references to them, but we never actually had the texts until very recently. So what actually happened was that in Egypt, in Upper Egypt, which is southern Egypt, just north of Luxor, at a place called Nag Hammadi, in 1945, apparently a peasant farmer uncovered a trove of buried documents written in papyrus, and they never came to light. The scientific community didn't learn about them until 1946 because of the way that they were discovered. And the the peasant that actually found them had all kinds of stories about how he'd found them. But it soon came to light that he had found them during tomb robberies, burial robberies is actually how they came to light. And there were a large number of them. And amongst a number of them that were found intact in Coptic, which was the latest version of the ancient Egyptian language, that hasn't been spoken as a living language for over 1,000 years, but is still used liturgically in the Coptic Orthodox Church of Egypt. So they were translated, and we have certain translations that came out in the 70s, etc. And so finally, at last, we had a complete text of these Gospels, which included the Gospel of Thomas. And it starts off, these are the sayings of the living Jesus, recorded by basically Thomas. He's got a few other names, Judas, Didymus, Thomas. Didymus means twin, so he was probably one of the twins. And that is actually how it starts. Now, this gospel is very different from the four synoptic gospels that we have because it's not a narrative. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are narratives. They're stories. They coincide sometimes, and sometimes they don't, of the life of Jesus and of his teachings. This is just a collection of sayings, very profound sayings. And I'm very glad if Mr. Greg Braden, who is well known to us, was able to explain them all, because I've read it a number of times, and I can tell you now it's a work in progress. There are some of the sayings that are there that I don't quite understand. There are others that speak to me and which I feel are very, very insightful, very profound. But there's others that I don't yet understand. They have for me the quality of Zen koans, sayings that you have to meditate on in order to get the meaning in a flash of realization. And there are a number of them. Some of the sayings are repeats of sayings and parables, etc., that are in the synoptic gospels. And some of them are very different or profound or something completely different. So there's also some people that would say that they're not really Gnostic, but I believe that they are. I think the Gospel of Thomas talks about a separation between this world and the higher realms, and he actually tells you in the Gospel of Thomas to seek the higher, not the lower. But that is open to interpretations. A number of the other Gospels that were found with it are certainly and definitely Gnostic. Now, we think what happened and why they were buried and hidden away is that they were probably part of a larger group of writings that were in some monastery's library. And when Athanasius in Alexandria declared them anathema, and all Gnostic Gospels other than the Synoptic Gospels anathema, they were probably taken out and buried by the monks, or possibly they were a group of writings that were requisitioned by a wealthy person, and they were buried with him. But the story of their founding seems to indicate that they weren't found doing normal things. The farmer said he was looking for new soil for his farm, and he uncovered them. But it's obvious that they were actually discovered while grave robbing, which is quite a regular pastime in Egypt, is grave robbing and selling on the black market things that are found from the ancient world. So a very insightful and very intriguing group of writings, set of writings, not in the same level as the Synoptic Gospels, not in that format, but very profound nonetheless.
Now, I was wondering now as well, because like you were mentioning, they were perhaps in the library. It's possibly that they were in the Great Alexander Library, because I know a lot of the stuff had been kept there, but perhaps it was a case where some of the priests, they knew it was coming, try to take the stuff out, hide it, to make sure that it didn't get destroyed, and that maybe later on somebody would have found it. So that's quite interesting, because we lost a lot.
Probably something like that happened.
Yeah,
something like that probably did happen, because they were very, very valuable. Yeah. Writing any written material in those days had to be handwritten. Was very, very any books tedious, or anything like that were very valuable. And then there was, later on, we find something else that seems to be linked to this Nag Hammadi library. In the 1970s, came to light was the Gospel of Judas, also which had been attacked by Bishop Irenaeus around the 2nd century. and also dating back to the 2nd century. And that one was almost destroyed because it came to light also under strange circumstances, and it was almost destroyed because it was locked away in a safe. And it was only published in 2006, I believe. And we saw that, and that is certainly a Gnostic gospel, and it seems to belong to the same kind of the same time period, certainly, and the same group of writings. Although the Gospel of Judas wasn't found amongst the Nag Hammadi, but it was found separately, but seems to be part of that group of writings, and legitimately so, and also dates back to the 2nd century, which the Nag Hammadi texts definitely do.
Well,
they're called codices.
Yeah.
Because they are on papyrus and wrapped in leather in a certain way. So very intriguing, very interesting.
Yeah.
So, Father Urbani, why was it not put into the... Because everyone goes on about that it's the most important gospel, it's got the true teachings of Jesus, so why didn't it make it into the actual book at the end?
Well, we've got to understand what was happening at the time of Irenaeus. At the time of Irenaeus, the early Christian church was being persecuted. It was not yet the time of Constantine. Christianity was being persecuted all over the Roman world, and people were being martyred for their belief in Christ. And so people like Bishop Irenaeus and the early church fathers were trying to remember the church at that time wasn't fully established. You had all of these different gospels. You got completely different ideas, and they were trying to bring this together into one believable faith. Which Christianity wasn't at its beginning. It had lots of different ideas, lots of different teachings. There was no dogma per se, but these early church fathers were trying to hammer this religion into a clear and understandable set of teachings with a dogma and as a religion, as a church. We know, for example, that this was completed in 325 AD at the Council of Nicaea, which was called by Constantine the Great. In order to do exactly that, because there were so many different ideas were pulled together to form this particular dogma. And I mean, I've been watching lately all this business around the conclave and the election of a new pope, etc. And they keep going back to saying, oh, well, the church is 2,000 years old. Actually, it's not. The church was established in 325 AD with the Council of Nicaea. Before then, there wasn't really a systematic, organized institution. There were many different little things going on for a long time. 325 years is a long time after Christ, and lots of different ideas were there. And the Council of Nicaea brought all of this together, and the early church fathers in the 2nd century were trying to accomplish this. If you were going to die for your faith, they wanted to make sure that you knew what you were dying for. But and they chose these 4 synoptic gospels, along with the epistles and the other writings, but the 4 synoptic gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, for no better reason that there were 4 gospels, there were 4 directions, and so there should be 4 gospels, and all these other gospels that didn't quite make it were anathema. Remember, at the Council of Nicaea, the revelations of St. John the Divine was almost rejected. As I recall, and I could be wrong on this, I think it was only by 1 vote that it was included in the canon. Remember, there's a lot of other books that some churches accepted as canonical that were also left out. And yeah, I'm talking specifically about the book of Enoch, the book of Jubilees. The Ethiopian Orthodox Bible has several more books. It's got 88 books in it, books that we don't have in our Bible, that they considered canonical, and that the Western Church and even some of the Eastern Church did not. Even to this day, there are 14 books of the Apocrypha which are not accepted by most Protestant churches, but which are actually originally part of the King James Version. I know in the Catholic tradition, those books of the Apocrypha are accepted as canonical, whereas some churches don't accept them. So this idea of what is canonical, what is not canonical, these were decided by committees, and the main one being the Council of Nicaea. But already Irenaeus and the early church fathers had condemned these particular writings, and that is because they seem to introduce a perspective that wasn't the popular superficial version. The one thing that you have to say about these gospels is that they are profound, profunda, from the deep. They are deep. They're not superficial. And as I was saying earlier about Greg Braden, I'm glad that he understands all of it. I certainly do not. I sent you a copy of the system earlier today, and I don't know if you had a read through it. Some of those sayings, I understand, I get what he's saying. Some of them require a lot more meditation. They can be sometimes strange. But I do think that it is profound, and it seems to introduce us to a Jesus who is not this Jesus that we have with the Church of the Council of Nicaea. This is a more philosophical, more esoteric Jesus, much deeper than the superficial kind of Jesus that we used to hearing about within the church. A different, a deeply inspired a man who was profound in his thinking. Whereas sometimes the synoptic gospels are like pretty much what you see is what you get. Now, we know that that's not always the case, because the parables hide immense treasures of deeper meaning, etc. But most people don't see that, and that is not the way that this has been presented by the church for the past 1,500 years or so. So the fact that we now have these texts opens up a whole new chapter of an esoteric investigation into what's actually going on here, what Christ was really teaching, what is the meat of the matter, what he was actually trying to get to, which is not always consistent with what the church has projected. But I mean, that's up to people to interpret themselves, you know.
Can I
So
ask you?
can you give us some?
Sorry,
Sorry, Lee.
Yeah, no,
I just wanted to find out some.
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to find out some examples of what you're talking about that was so profound in the text. Like
Well,
maybe
he seems to indicate, and I'm paraphrasing here because I haven't memorized the verses, but I mean, he keeps referring to children, that like a 70-year-old will ask a little child of 3 about the kingdom of God. Christ was very interested in the ideas of children, and what he was actually trying to get to was purity. We are blocked by our pretensions, as it were. And the whole story about where he tells the disciples to bring the children to him, and that you won't get into the kingdom of heaven unless you become like this little child. He's referring to the purity of children before the veil descends. Purity, non-pretentiousness. Later on in the Gospel of Thomas, he says, when you will take off your clothes and put them under your feet like a little child, without having any concern about it, you will attain to the kingdom of heaven. In other words, lose your pretensions. It is our pretentiousness, our egos, and the pretentiousness that we build around ourselves that cuts us off from the kingdom of heaven. Then one of the more profound ones, and again, I'm just paraphrasing, I haven't remembered these things. He said, split a piece of wood, lift up a stone, and God is there. He's talking about inner dimensions. He's talking about the fact that God and the kingdom of heaven is here, within and without. It's within inner dimensions. He's talking about a layered reality that we were discussing on our previous podcast, that you are more than just what you see, that there are layers. And the kingdom of heaven, the pleroma, is within. It's within, and it's everywhere. It is immediately available and accessible. It's just that we block ourselves with all this pretentious nonsense and with all this ego. So those are the very profound things. The other profound things that teacher tells me that Jesus was talking as a soul rather than as a personality, because we believe that at the transfiguration, the lower personality was completely wiped away. He's speaking of the soul. So they come to him and they say, what must we do about diet? You know, should we have a special diet? We kosher, we Jews, what must we do? And he says that you will be defiled not by what goes in your mouth, but by what comes out of your mouth. So that is a very profound thing. So it's not what you eat in this world, and that it's what comes out of your mouth that will defile you, not what you put in it. And then later on, of course, they bring up the idea of circumcision. Of course, they were Jewish, so they were part of the whole circumcision. And Christ says, if the Father had intended that you had to be circumcised, you would have been born circumcised. He says the circumcision of the heart is more important than the circumcision of other things. So it is this profound insight which raises the awareness, raises the consciousness of what Jesus is actually talking about. His disciples were still very much personality. still very much in this world, identifying themselves as Jews, as people that were under the law, that had to keep kosher, that had to be circumcised, all that kind of thing. And Christ is way above this. He's way above this, and he's trying to tell them, stop worrying about that. You won't be defiled by what goes in your mouth. What comes out of your mouth will defile you. And also then talking about the circumcision rather of the heart. That's where you should circumcise. So it's sayings like that which are extremely profound. And then right at the end, he says something very controversial, which is very difficult to understand, where they say to him, why are you talking to Mary? She's a woman, and women aren't worthy of life. Now, if you've ever read the Jewish man's morning prayer, when an Orthodox Jewish man says his morning prayers with his tefillin and his tallis and all that kind of thing, two of the prayers that are sections that come up in the prayer is that he thanks God for not making him a dog, and he thanks God for not making him a woman. So they had a very different idea of the genders as what we have today. But then Christ says, but I will make her a man so that you can come in. And he's talking about what I think is that he's talking about reincarnation, that she will return the next time in a male body, which then is better positioned for the raising of the Kundalini and all that kind of thing. That's how I'm reading it. And I could be wrong there. But it's a very interesting thing to say. It's a very different thing to say. And he talks about when the two become one, and when the outer is like the inner and all that kind of thing, then you will have attained it. So he's basically, what he's pointing to is our obsession with our personalities and the things of personality and this illusion of separation that we have. Whereas we should actually be focusing on what's in, what's profound, and what's spiritual. So there are many ways of understanding it, and I don't pretend to understand them all. Some of them speak to me, and some of them are going to require a lot of meditation. So it's a work. The thing that makes it exciting is it's a work in progress. This is obviously a profound document. This is obviously profound, insightful stuff. But a lot of it is going to take a lot of work. You're going to need to meditate on certain things, and maybe in time, understanding of some of them will come up. Some of them will be available and understood immediately, and others, there's some that I don't quite get, and I'm going to keep looking at them. It's not a long document. You can read through it in like 20 minutes or something. It's not very long, so it's not a ponderous tome or a difficult thing to read. It's not as long as the other Gospels are, reading through Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John. So it's just a selection of sayings, and some of them point to some of his better known parables, etc. But it's very insightful stuff, and that's why I like it, because it points a light on a different kind of understanding of Christ's teachings. We've been indoctrinated by a post Council of Nicaea church, which I think sometimes has gotten things very wrong. They try to avoid the esoteric. They try to avoid the deeply mystical, and maybe that, I don't know if that was the way Jesus actually was presenting the stuff. So it's interesting, and it's open to interpretation.
That's
but
what
the church
that's
does not
what
accept it.
Master Eckhart said. He said, clergies may quarrel, but mystics talk the same language.
Yes, and I think it's a difference of perception. The church's structure in that is useful. You've got to have structure in any organization. The 7 sacraments, etc., as I've discussed before, work. They are engaging, and we can use this structure. But what I think, and this definitely speaks to the Gospel of Thomas, is that this helps us to gain a better perspective of the man and the divine that presented itself in the form of Jesus. That this man was on a completely different level. And I sometimes wonder if the church, who accepts that he's God and the second aspect of the Trinity, actually understand how profound that actually is. The depth of it is what is impressive, But having said that, I must just once again say, those aren't the interpretations of my church. Those are my personal interpretations. And also, I don't pretend to understand all of it. I really don't. There are some things there that I have an idea. There's some things there that completely escape me and are going to require a lot of meditative work, working with it. And maybe in time, you'll understand them better. You should read it every now and again, and then at some point you gain more insight into it. I've got this gem. This gem came out, the Gnostic Bible. This gem came out in 2003 from Shambhala, and it was only one edition that came out, and I'm so glad I got it. And it's got the Gospel of Thomas in here, but it's got all the other things that are considered Gnostic in it, and it really is a gem. I've never seen it again. I've never seen it in the shops again. It came out like as a one print kind of thing. And it's very interesting. They don't all seem to be saying the same thing. You got some things. This is more, the Gospel of Thomas is more, as I said, requires meditation to understand it. It doesn't say specifically what it means. It alludes to certain things. It gives examples of certain things. Later things like the Gospel of Judas, for example, is blatantly Gnostic, and seems to take the matter much further. In fact, in that book, Christ tells Judas that he's choosing Judas to betray him, because Judas will lead to them destroying the man that covers him. In other words, he's so attached to the Spirit, so in line with the Spirit, that the personality over him, the physical, emotional, and mental, is actually a hindrance to him going further, and that he actually chose Judas to betray him as a mission. So, I mean, that is profoundly Gnostic. Whereas the Gospel of Thomas is more one that alludes to or points to certain or suggests certain things rather than saying them outright.
Okay, so
I
anyway,
believe that it's valid, absolutely. The copies that we've got are definitely from the 2nd century. The Nag Hammadi texts in that might have been written down a bit later, but we know from Irenaeus that they were known in 150 years after Christ, around about that time. So they do seem to be absolutely valid.
All right. Now, before I get to my question regarding Jesus and the Gnostic texts, there was one thing that you kind of touched on a little bit, where it says two becomes one. That
Yes.
whole idea there. Now, when I was listening to Greg Baden talking about it, he said the saying, when something like this, also I can't remember exactly word for word, but when two in the house become one, they are able to move mountains.
Yes.
So what he was trying to say there, according to Greg, was if you are able, and then he brings a whole lot of other like people that he's spoken to. He's got a Native American Indian friend regarding prayer. He says the two in the house basically means emotion, and I can't remember, but I think it might be feeling. He says, so when you're praying, you cannot ask the matrix or God or whoever it is. You can't say, please, can you heal this person? Or I would like to get some money at some stage. Please help me with some, with food, whatever. The way you've got to pray is you've got to have the emotion. So you've got to believe, okay, you've got to believe in the now. You've got to believe it like it's already happened, and you've got to feel like it's already happened, like you're already living the healing of this person. So when you're praying, you're saying, thank you, God, for healing so and so and so. It's not, they haven't been healed yet, but in your belief and in your
I've heard this idea before, but I've actually heard it from fundamentalist Christians, not from mysticals. Just remember one thing: what creates the illusion of separation for us is the physical, the emotional, and the mental. And in mystical schools, you are actually taught to contain the emotional, because emotions are the enemy of spirit, of spirituality. Emotions run amok, and putting emotion in it actually is part of the blockage. It's part of the filter.
I might be wrong. It might not have been emotion. I might be wrong.
Yeah.
Might not have been emotion.
It could be that. I know that the personality is our biggest prison, the physical, emotional, and lower mental. We would have a lot better if we were on higher levels. In other words, those areas are not so much suppressed while we are alive, but are controlled. There's a lot of people that don't know the difference between emotional and spiritual, and that's very sad. I can assure you, from having had spiritual experiences, there is no emotion. The lowest level that comes down to is the higher mental, which is the abstract mind. It never goes below that. So if you encounter or have an encounter with spiritual things, the thing that will disturb you profoundly immediately is the lack of emotion. When you're talking about angelic entities or higher spiritual entities, there is no emotion on that level. They are above that, which is very disturbing for us so caught up in it. So the way I would interpret that, and this is just an interpretation because, he's not pointing to anything specific. It's when we are in all these different levels, 2, 3, 4, all that kind of thing, that is where the separation comes in. And if you can make the 2 1, if you can get rid of or rise above these different layers, then you'll understand the 1. So, for example, what I'm trying to illustrate here is love. Why is love so important? Well, love exists on the physical level. We know that. Even animals know that. Then you have it on the emotional level, that fuzzy level, feeling that comes up. You have it on the mental level where you can intellectualize it. But above that, on the soul level, love becomes compassion. So it's inclusive now, not only of you, but of all souls. And on the spirit level, it becomes 1. That, I think, is what he was trying to get to. There's all these different levels that we are on and sunk down in. If we can get rid of that, then we will be 1 again. We'll get rid of this illusion of separation, and then we'll be able to do whatever it is. We'll be able to change reality on that level in any way we want to. They keep going on about the faith of mustard seeds, etc. That comes up quite often in the Gospels. And then he also says, going back to that mustard seed, he says the kingdom of God is like a mustard seed. It's very tiny, but when you plant it, it grows into one of the greater trees. And it's the same kind of thing. It's internal. It's within. It's inner dimensions which are actually here, right now, here and now. And so there isn't this idea. We have this idea in our minds that God is far up above or something. It's not. It is actually right here. It's imminent. It's just that these different levels that we're on, this build-up of all these different filters that we have, including physical, emotional, and lower mental, these things are actually what separate us from understanding that or realizing that. So in the Gnostic sense, we are trapped within space and time in these bodies. And when I'm talking about bodies, I'm talking about physical, emotional, and lower mental. And that it is that separates us, that creates the illusion of separation. I think that's what he's alluding to. And I could be wrong, but that's what I get out of that. Is because earlier on he says when you make the outside like the inside and the inside like the outside, etc. He seems to be alluding to that, where the real you is not what's here on the outside. The real you is what is within. That's what I think he's alluding to. But it's open to interpretation. I haven't seen that presentation of Greg Braden. Obviously, I know about Greg Braden. Very expensive books, but that's a distinct possibility. He did actually say that, though. But as you can see, that kind of thing that he mentions, he's not pointing directly to something. He's not being direct. He is shrouding it in a bit of a mystery so that people will go away and think. And the one thing that the Gospel of Thomas does do, it makes you think. So that is very good, because you sit back and say, now, what on earth does he mean by this? And you've got to consider it and meditate on it and contemplate it. The meaning doesn't immediately become clear. You've got to work with it, like a koan, like a Zen koan. Suddenly the meaning comes to you in a flash, and it's inexplicable. You just understand it. But no, I certainly am not in a position to have understood all of it.
But sorry.
Look, about that whole thing about Greg Braden. So what he was trying to say there was the 2 stories that he brought up. The one friend with the American Indian friend of his, and there was another Brazilian group. I think they were trying to heal a lady that had a tumor. And how he was telling them, he was saying to them, look, how it actually happens is the tumor is the mountain. It's the obstacle. Okay. As with regards to his American Indian friend, it had apparently in wherever I don't know which part of America it was, but it hadn't received rain in I don't know how long. Okay, but it was droughts. It was a whole big thing. And the American Indian friend phoned him and said to him, listen, come with me. I want to take you to a place. And he was like, okay, cool. So he went with this guy and they took him to where the ancestors, many, many centuries of ancestors came to the spot. It was like a sacred circle, almost like our circle that we went to go and see there in Johannesburg, well, close to Johannesburg there, William. So very similar to Adam's calendar. Yeah, very similar to that. So he stepped in there, took his shoes off. The American Indian stood in there, literally 20 seconds. And he turned around and he said, okay, I'm hungry, let's go for food. And it was like, what was that all about? He said, no, I've asked, it's going to rain. And the guy says, but what did you ask? Did you pray for rain? He says, no, you never ever pray for something. You can't pray for something. You must, when you pray, you must pray to believe that it's already happened and that it's happening. And it's the same thing what happened with the Brazilian guys. They didn't say, when they were trying to get rid of the tumor, they didn't say, please get rid of the tumor, please. They were saying, gone, now. So it was almost like in the present and it went. And he
like
says, now with his Indian friend, that when they went for something to eat, he said, when he got back to his hotel room, it started raining. But it rained so much for 3 days that everything flooded. So he phones his friend and says, what the hell happened there? I mean, you ask him for rain, he says, but it's like destroyed everything. It's like destroyed crops. He says, the Indian friend said, yeah, it's a bit difficult because the ancestors don't explain how that works. When it rains, it rains. They got past that thing yet.
But also, Lee, this is the whole in the New Age circles, like the whole this manifesting kind of, like, it's a big fad at the moment. It's a big like craze, and this is how they explain how to manifest. Like, and they've built a huge billion-dollar industry about this manifestation thing. And I mean, it's Greg Baden, it's Joe Dispenza. It's like every single person it's the same philosophy, and that's how they say you manifest. And it all comes down to a very simple concept. Like you just said it now, and they've had like these huge seminars. You go there for weeks to learn it and everything. But it's exactly like you said it. And I mean, I took a whole bunch of classes. I spent so much money on that, exactly what you're saying, that principle, and did it for 3 days, 4 days. And then I get my mum, because I'm studying Rosicrucianism, and then the 1 week I just get my Rosicrucian thing, my monograph for the week, and I read it, and it has exactly what you just said in the monograph, which is basically for free. And I was like, geez, well, I just spent 20 grand on this like stupid course, and I now got this for free. It's exactly the same. So it's like but also I remember Mother Teresa, that there's a story about her. I don't know if it's true or not, but she had to rescue these kids. It was during some war or something, and they said that she just sat there and she prayed and she prayed and she prayed and she prayed, and then she went and she just grabbed the kids and she brought them back, and they were like, geez, how did you just pray for God to like protect you? And she said, no, I just prayed that those kids, that I just mentally pictured that I was going to get the kids and they were going to come back here, and that's what I was praying. I was just mentally visualizing the kids being back here with me, and like it had already been done. And then she manifested it. So it's like quite it's like a buzz thing at the moment, this manifestation thing. But I think, but I love what Father Urbani was saying, because like he was saying, the kingdom is within you, and you're trying to, get the feeling, that feeling of love, because they say that's how to manifest it is. You got to feel the feelings that it brings you. When to manifest it, you have to feel those emotions. But Father Urbani was saying that the feeling of love, and it becomes a group thing, as compassion, and that the Gospel of Thomas was trying to say that the God is within you, and that's why I always thought it was banned, though. Father Barney, that it was banned because it took the power away from the church, because they were saying the God is within you, and you don't have to go through the priests and the clergies and everything to get access to God, because now it's saying that it's within you, and that's why they didn't want it to get out. And then also, didn't they, even in the Bible that we have at the moment, it says that it says the Father is among us, but then if you go to read the Greek or the Hebrew, it says God's within us, but they've changed it to God's among us, because it can't. And that's why it was heretical, the Gospel of Thomas.
Yeah, Like we know, for example, that one of the first crusades, the Albigensian crusade, was a crusade against the Cathars in southern France, who were Gnostic Christians. And they were considered a threat to the church and to the Pope. So there's no doubt in my mind that the church does act like that. In history, it has acted like that to defend its entire thing. But then again, one could argue that Christ established the priesthood on Maundy Thursday when he said, take and eat this. This is my body. Do this in memory of me. He was establishing a priesthood. And then when he poured out the Holy Spirit on the disciples, he was creating an apostolic succession. So he was forming a church. So I'm not sure that it's because you can do away with the clergy or you can do away with priests, etc. I think it has more got to do with the fact that they possibly what you said, that they were trying to, that they didn't want people to know too much too soon. They wanted to control that process. That's a distinct possibility. I don't have insight.
But also
what I can say with regard to this process of manifesting, etc., is we do have within us the power of the divine. We know that we've got that. We should be able to do these things. So we have that within us. There's no doubt about it. The divine is within us, but it is clouded by all of these three conditions that we impose upon ourselves. Pretentiousness and things like that. If I am someone, and I think that you might agree, that believes that within ourselves we are able to do these things, we are somehow mindset in our current culture, in our current, the way we look at things, the way we perceive reality, possibly needs to shift. And also because we are blocked with the polluted subconscious that we have, our polluted physical, our polluted emotional, our polluted mental, and they are polluted. If you think that the physical world is polluted, you should see the astral realm. The emotional world is even more polluted. So those lower spheres that we are sunk in my mind, is actually what blocks this amazing spiritual power and understanding and realization. And so without destroying them or committing suicide or ever what you want to do, is controlling them and then rising above them is the way we gain access to those higher realms, etc. So, but as I say, it's open to interpretation. That's a very interesting story that Lee told us there. We know that some of those Amazonian tribes that use ayahuasca and that have insights into the internal realms, etc., very dangerous. Needs to be done with people that know what they're doing. But yes, these things are possible. And it's not that it's only the South Americans that have been doing that. People have been taking certain substances and that to help unblock things and to reach higher levels. I'm not promoting that. I'm not a person that uses weed or that.
Come on, Father Urbani. We know you put mushrooms in the Eucharist. When
no, I haven't. I've had mushrooms
just joking,
once, and I actually didn't like the experience at all. I was looking at my watch. I mean, I loved the colors, and I saw certain things, but I actually was wanting it to. I don't like that feeling at all. So no, I haven't actually had that. I have had deep spiritual visions and things like that have happened after much fasting, etc. So, etc. But I mean, this is the beauty about the scripture, is that it makes you think. Now, what is the interpretation? What does it mean? Someone's going to come up with one thing. Someone's going to come up with the one thing. And the other thing is that we're going to see in it, like all things, what we want to see in it. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I don't deny that at all. I have a certain bias, and so obviously I'm going to see what I want to see. The beauty of the Gospel of Thomas is that it forces you to think, and it forces you to look within. And people that aren't able to do that are not going to understand it at all, and it's going to be boring to them, and they're going to throw it away. But when you look at something, it should trouble you if you're not understanding it, and that troubling of you should actually make you look deeper. That's the way I see it. That's the way I'm thinking of it myself. But I mean, I might not.
That's why it probably wasn't put in the canon there, was because no one could understand it. Because you need to be high initiative.
Almost happened to the Book of Revelations. Now, the Book of Revelations is very difficult to understand, and for that reason, it was almost thrown out. Now, can you imagine the Bible without the Book of Revelations? The Book of Revelations is the most important prophecy within the New Testament, talking about prophecy. And although we don't fully understand all of it, bits and pieces start coming to light. It's a very difficult thing to understand, but that might also give you insight into what they were trying to do. They wanted something that was simple, that was topical, that was on the surface, that people could just go in and understand, that they could teach. Things that took time, that took meditation, that took insight. They tried to avoid that. That's possibly the reason why. So I think that your opinion on that is very valid, William. That could possibly be it, that they didn't understand. They weren't the brightest pennies in the purse. I mean, I still to this day believe that a lot of Jesus's disciples simply did not get him at all. And Peter apparently seems to have been one of them. And remember that Paul wasn't even originally one of his disciples. He was Saul. He was an Orthodox Jewish Pharisee who was persecuting the Christians before he had his conversion on the road to Damascus. Luke, for example, was not one of the original things. He was a doctor that was specifically sent to the Holy Land to bring back an account of what had happened. So I think that you make a valid point there.
So was Jesus just like, oh my gosh, there's no one, I'll just have to take these guys because there's no one else, and these guys not even that bright, but this is all I got. And you just use them.
It's a possibility. Look, people do things like that when people don't understand it. Unfortunately, though, we've also had more than 1,000 years of the church being in the hands of the uninitiated. And remember, it also went through the Dark Ages where they were very illiterate. Only the clergy really were literate. They didn't have access the way we do today to the high teachings of the East, of Buddhism, of Hinduism, of Jainism, of Confucianism and Taoism and all of those things. They never had insight into those things. So they were in a very narrow place, and they didn't really understand. They also didn't even really have, only later on did they have access to the works of Plotinus and of, all those ancient Greek philosophers who were also very insightful. That was lost for a very long period of time during the Dark Ages. I mean, we went through a time where there was just no learning, very little learning, and even the learning that was there was so limited. And but somehow the church has survived down to the modern age, and we have access to other religious teachings, which are really a help, which help us to see different points of view. And so, we're in a more fortunate position. And remember, that church was also under persecution at the time, and you paid with your life as an early Christian in Romanate. The terrible things that they did to the Christians in the Colosseum, crucifixions, burning, killing by wild animals, that was a reality that was happening. So they needed something that was quick, easy, mobile, that they could take and explain things to very quickly. But this is the kind of thing that takes time. The Gospel of Thomas and a lot of the other Gnostic Gospels take time and take thought. And take, you need to use your contemplation to actually get into them. So, it's one of those things. It is what it is. So it was viciously attacked. We never had the text. Then the text came to light.
So it's
and
like
all will be revealed. In fact, it says in the Gospel of Thomas, there's nothing that is hidden that will not be revealed. And so these things do come out. They are being revealed. Part of the Nag Hammadi text were also a large portion of Hamitic writings. So it wasn't only Gnostic texts and things, there were Hamitic writings as well. But it seems like the stuff was buried because it was declared anathema and that they weren't supposed to have it. So it was buried and put away. But very interesting, very mysterious and very interesting, but very profound too.
Okay, here's my thing. When you read the Gospel of Thomas and some of the other Gospels, there seems to be a very heavy influence of Hellenistic, Buddhist, Jewish, some old Jewish traditions, a bit of ancient Egyptian, and even Eastern traditions. Because, I mean, if you look at all these things, it's very, very, very similar. So my question to you, do you think that when Jesus left with whoever, when he was at 12, when he left, supposedly, because you must remember from 12 to 33, it's like there's a nothing.
Yeah.
Do you think it's possible that he had gone across to Egypt to learn the wisdom, across to China to learn the wisdom, across to Hellenistic stuff, and he everything that he brought through was all the stuff that he had learned, and he was trying to teach the people the proper way of how to get to the Creator, how to get to God. But because the Jewish tradition, the main Jewish tradition, what we read, is not the way. I mean, if you look at the Old Testament, and you'll agree with me, I think you even mentioned this yourself, that the God that they talk about in the Old Testament is not God. I mean, it's a very, very vengeful deity. Very, very. He chooses sides. That's not a God. That's something very different. So, do you think this is what he was trying to teach? He had gone to various places. He had learned what he needed to learn. He came back as a master to try and teach the people, this is how you get to where you're supposed to be going. And this is the reason why it became what it is.
No. Well, the thing is that, this story keeps coming up. In fact, in Jammu and Kashmir, where they're busy fighting at the moment, there's actually a tomb where they say that this is the tomb of Isa. So, let's look at it from the narrative. So, when they flee from Jerusalem, from Bethlehem, where he's born, the interesting thing is that where do they go? They go to Heliopolis in Egypt. Yeah. Okay. Which the ancient Egyptians called On. Now, On is the site of the earliest known temple in Egypt, and it was actually just a stone pillar and a circle, which was the sun god, representing the sun god, the solar deity. Obviously phallic, very similar to the lingam and the yoni, etc. That was there. That is what was in Heliopolis. So Heliopolis was a city of initiates. Now, the narrative seems to point at the fact that Jesus was very well educated. The next we hear of him after that is when they go visit Jerusalem and he gets lost. They lose him and they go back quickly to look for him, and they find him studying and debating with the doctors of the law in the temple. So a 12-year-old boy was doing that. So he was obviously very well educated. He was able to actually hold his own against these learned scholars, etc. So there's a distinct possibility that Jesus was influenced. Whether he actually traveled there or not, no one will actually be able to tell you. But there's similarity of ideas. For example, with certain kinds of Buddhism, with certain kinds of Hinduism, with the other things, Manichaeans, Zoroastrian, the dualism of Zoroastrianism, etc., are definitely present. They are definitely there. Whether that came deliberately or whether that came from insight, whether he was actually a master who had gone through processes of initiation, he was only 33, this is something that no one can say for sure. It's a distinct possibility, though, because of the insight that he had. As a young man, he already had that profound insight. The Gospel of Thomas is very deep. It's not the kind of thing that a very young man would actually come up with or have insight into. So we know, what do we know? We know that he was probably very well educated. In fact, the Jewish population at that time was highly literate compared to everywhere else in the world. We reckon that 1 in 10 men was actually able to read, because you have to do that as part of your initiation in Judaism. You know, you do your what do they call it?
Read the Torah.
You read your Torah. What is it called? You have your mitzvah, whatever it is, your bar mitzvah.
Bar mitzvah, yeah.
So that was part of it. They were taught to read. So they were very literate compared to other people. Probably more literate even than the people in the Roman Empire were. So that would have given him access. And as you say, at that time, the great library at Alexandria was still open, had not yet been destroyed. It was destroyed later on by the Christians, and then another version was destroyed by the Muslims. So that was still there. And all the ancient works of all the ancient Greek and Hellenistic philosophers, Plato, Socrates, all of those would have been there, including the Egyptian stuff, alluding to previous high civilization, etc., would have been there. Herodotus, all of them would have been there. So Heliopolis is not very far away from Alexander did already exist. It was built by Alexander the Great in the 300s before Christ. So it was already there. All of that was there. It doesn't take an extreme stretch of the imagination to imagine him visiting those places or going through the whole process of initiation, etc. He definitely seems to have been above everyday Jewish religion, because he obviously, what he says, I mean, they catch him gleaning in the fields on the Sabbath, and they say, how can you do this? It's the Sabbath. You're working. He said, listen, God created the Sabbath for man, not man for the Sabbath. So his understanding was certainly not that of the Pharisees, put it that way. He was certainly more open-minded. Yes, he was a Jewish man. He seems to have been a Nazarene who takes certain vows and that, but he was certainly a lot more enlightened. There's a distinct possibility. For example, the Mandaeans, who now live in Iraq along the Tigris and Euphrates, who are the remnants of St. John the Baptist's disciples. They moved from the Jordan and they went there. One of these religious books apparently is Al-Hind, the book of India. They seem to have and include within their religious books, which people outside of their tradition never see, an Indian book, a Hindu book, containing Indian philosophy. So they look to that as well. We know that that is true, that they have an Indian scripture amongst their canonical works. The ancient world was a heck of a lot more connected than what we think it is. You know, we think, oh, these people are so backward. And no, they weren't. They had established trade routes. Things got around. I mean, in Rome, they were wearing silk underwear. They didn't know where it came from. They know that it came from the East. So the Roman Empire didn't know about the Chinese Empire, but they were trading. You know, they were wearing silk. And apparently the Roman emperors wore new silk underwear every day. You know, different underwear. So they were definitely.
Jeepers, they must have been hygienic as hell.
Yeah, well, they were a lot more hygienic than what came later. In fact,
yeah, that's what I'm saying. You think of the back in the day and you think it's gross.
Well, the thing is that, for example, look at the American Civil War. That was one of the first, like, modern type of war where the weaponry had become much more destructive than the usual thing. I mean, they still lined up with single shot muskets and shot each other. But they said that the ancient Egyptian doctors probably were more skilled at healing than what the doctors in the American Civil War were. I mean, it was appalling. They had hardly any anesthetics. There was no concept or idea of hygiene and that kind of thing, which the ancient Egyptians and Greeks and that seem to have an idea about. So, we've come up and we've fallen down quite a few times. I mean, we look at ancient Rome now. The Romans, we've still got aqueducts and roads that the Romans built that are still in use because they invented concrete, and better concrete than what we've got, because they used volcanic ash to make the concrete. That's why places like the Pantheon in Rome, one of the oldest buildings, nearly 2,000 years old, is still perfectly intact. And those huge aqueducts in Spain and that are still carrying water to this day. They were more advanced than what we give them credit for. Yeah, they 100%. Knew more than what we give them credit for, I think. We're very biased in understanding that was a very brutal world. That it's not. We still use Roman law as the basis of our law. They were very, very enlightened men.
I know. So, imagine what kind of iPhone they could have made back then. If they probably would have made a bloody good iPhone.
And unfortunately, what happened with the dissolution of the Western Empire, remember, the Eastern Roman Empire lasted until the 1400s, until the Ottoman Turks conquered Constantinople. The Eastern Roman Empire never really fell. It was just taken over by the Ottomans. In the West, though, the Roman Empire fell, and all kinds of things. And you had all these different barbaric tribes, Germanic tribes, Huns, and that coming in and invading. That destroyed a lot of knowledge. But I mean, having said that, though, we're able to see these things more clearly. We have access to different philosophies which actually support these teachings, and it's not beyond the stretch of the imagination to say that possibly Jesus was certainly initiated. He certainly was. The Bible tells us he was in Egypt. Egypt was a great civilization of initiation. Even in that late stage, those temples and that were still all open. The initiation schools and that were still all open. The last of the Egyptian temples was closed 370s or something like that in Upper Egypt. They still had all of that in Jesus' time, and he was certainly very enlightened. He was certainly very well educated, and he was certainly not bound by orthodox constraints. That's the impression that I get. Yeah. So Lee, it's a distinct possibility. I mean, you get stories every now and again of him having been there. You remember in the Muslim world, they call him the Prophet Isa. And they have great respect for him in the Quran. Of course, they don't accept him as the son of God. They accept him as a prophet. But there are local traditions in India, especially Jammu and Kashmir and all that the claim that he was actually there. It's a distinct possibility. Distinct possibility. And as you say, we hear about him last when he was 12, and then we don't hear about him again until he was 33. You know, what was he doing? Was he making furniture in his father's shop?
No.
Actually, the word in Greek is tektonis, which means a builder. Was he building? Was he, what was he doing? He was very far advanced. Even if he was a chosen soul that came in for this particular mission, which is what we believe, even so, at that age, being so advanced and so enlightened, there was definitely either initiation of high quality education, but also probably the divine in it as well. Remember, I'm a Christian. I believe that Jesus was a manifestation of God the Son. I believe in it. And maybe one of the talks that we must have going forward is all the latest evidence that's coming out from the Shroud of Turin, which now seems to be authentic. I was just reading something the other day that negative image that was put onto the cloth, the shroud, which could not have been put there by any artificial means, was from an extremely high energy burst of radiation, gamma rays. And yet it's there for everyone to see. So something happened there. Is it within the realms of possibility? Absolutely. For someone that is so elevated, yes, I believe that these things.
Yeah, well, the Buddhists, when they acquire the rainbow body and they transcend through the rainbow body. I mean, that's a documented thing that the Buddhists do. So maybe
these things are possible.
In that shroud, he got the rainbow body.
That's
and
right.
That's what that light is.
Latent within us are these powers. But we are being blocked. And the possibility, and this is the Gnostic coming out of me, that it's possibly even deliberate. That we are deliberately being kept ignorant. That we are deliberately, those aspects of us, those higher levels are deliberately being jammed to prevent us from actually raising ourselves. Benefits from us being stuck in the cycle of birth and death and being ignorant. Something benefits from that.
It is a prison planet, and the reptilians are sucking our energy.
There's something like that. I don't know who it is. We call them the archons, whatever. Remember what St. Paul says. It's in the scriptures, and if you're a Christian, you have to accept it. He says we strive not against flesh and blood, but against authorities, against principalities, against spiritual evil in high places, which is directly stating that it's Gnostic, directly stating that we are being suppressed. That's also, the New Testament makes it very clear that we are, that the world is ruled by the devil. This is his place. He promises Christ. He says, if you'll bow down and worship me, I'll give you all these kingdoms. He wouldn't have been able to do that if they weren't his. He controls this lower realm. We suffer because we are where we're not meant to be. We've been lured in. And so the idea of original sin, which people have different ideas about, is not eating an apple in a garden or having sex or something like that. The original sin was that we fell in the context of the parable of the prodigal son, leaving the father, taking his share and falling down into this, waking up in the pigsty, realizing where he is, and then trying to return to the father. So that parable tells us what it's actually all about. We fell. There was a fall. I think the church gets it wrong in the interpretation of what that fall was, but we fell basically into this lower realm, and we are blocked here. My personal belief, we're trapped here, and that there are archons, evil things that benefit from us, and probably that, and this is very, very controversial, that the gods of the Old Testament, the Elohim, the powerful ones, which is always plural, were not really God as we understand it, the spiritual source of all being. They were powerful entities that were controlling humanity, manipulating humanity, even evolving humanity, etc. So there is that's my personal opinion.
But now that's more
Christ would have been aware of it.
Yeah. But it's a prison planet. I've always thought it was a prison planet, and I've at least heard it about 1 million times. My whole philosophy was a prison planet, but we are actually in hell. People got to wake up and look around and be like, you got to realize this is hell. We in hell, and that's why we got to purify ourselves.
This is a hellish level, and we are bound in space and time, which is not our natural place. We came from a higher level. We have some kind of impression of that, but we don't fully understand it, and we deliberately kept stupid. We have evidence of higher civilizations, which we ignore because they don't fit in with the normal narrative. Things are very controlled here, and I think we understand it. I feel very blocked. I feel very trapped. I believe that I should be doing better, but I'm not, because I'm forced to be the concerns of this world. So yeah, it's a difficult one.
Okay, let me ask you a question here before we end off, because now something else has popped into my mind. So you say we've fallen, like the prodigal son. So now this brings to mind, we are then the fallen ones. Okay, which basically means that we were at one stage of almost like angelic presence, where we've now lost all of that, and we're now stuck here. So we are actually part of the fallen. We are part of the fallen ones. That's actually, I just come to mind. I just think it's shit. Now,
well, you can think
we're
about
trying to
that.
get a way out of it. We
No.
were deceived.
The word that's translated as fallen is Nephilim. Nephilim literally means fall.
Well,
now,
that means us.
In the Old Testament, yeah, it could very well be interpreted that way. That, yeah, we are part of the fallen. We fell. Whether it was that fall, or whether it was an earlier fall, whether it was a cyclical fall of the soul down into the lower realms, we fell. So we are the fallen. We have that divine aspect within us, and we also have the animal aspect in us pushed together. We fell into this lower realm. And the only way to escape from it is to overcome the animal and to unfold the divine. So that's a very good observation that you made there.
I've just got goosebumps. So we were actually led astray. The ones that were fallen,
we were lured.
We
are lured. Think about nature. Think about entrapment. Think about spiders, how they entrap things in a web. But if you take it in the context of free will, we saw something that we liked. We saw sensual things maybe that attracted us. And because of that, we fell. So now, the way I like to describe it is, we're supposed to be on the 17th floor in the penthouse. We're not even in the basement. He comes down and says, we are even in the foundation. What on earth are you doing here? You're supposed to, the Father's looking for you. There's a party going on there. What the hell are you doing down here? That's the illustration that I sometimes use. And I feel that very much. I feel that
too.
Yeah. We know that we're more than this. We know that we should have more powers than that. And somehow they're jammed. We are jammed. And part of that is incarnation into the flesh. There's something malicious about this. I feel the malice.
It's funny. That's what I feel. I feel that all the time, and it's like keep on telling Leon on a lot of other podcasts. I keep on saying we're in a prison planet. This is a prison planet. We've stuck here, and I mean, I'm not going to go into the whole thing again because I've said it about 1 million times on this podcast. But there's also that thing about the reincarnation when you die, you see that light, that bright light, and you get drawn to it. And they say that's when because it's drawing you towards it, and then that sucks you back into the trap again because you
see what the problem is here, William. The problem here is that we don't know enough for sure. We are offering solutions, we're offering ideas and things like that. What do we actually know for sure? Very little.
But it makes sense. Yeah, it absolutely makes 100% sense. So I'm like, I've actually just awoken. I've just realized where we actually fit into this whole system. I'm like,
we are,
and that's why the Matrix is real. The movie, I mean.
There's many people that now say the Matrix isn't a movie, it's a documentary. And I certainly feel that way. Yeah. We are in an illusion. And I mean, the Hindus talk about it all the time, and the Buddhists, they call it Maya, illusion. You're under illusion, but the sense that I get is that it's deliberate and there's malice involved in it. And I get the illusion of being trapped in Shelob's web. We have fallen, those trapdoor spiders, that we've been lured into that and now we're stuck. That's the idea.
I feel exactly this. I've always felt like that as well. Always.
Well, it seems like
that's what makes me so depressed sometimes.
Absolutely, and there shouldn't be depression. Think about how ridiculous depression is. We shouldn't be, but we are. It's because everything is artificial. Everything is wrong. Everything is manipulated. Our financial systems, everything. If you think about the prophecies in the book of Matthew, he says, for everything is a deceit, and even the elect are deceived. It is the world that we have now is one big deception. That is something that we're coming to realize now more than anything else. Politics guides us there, but if you think about it, everything is a deception in this world. It's all a lie.
Yeah. And it's funny because my daughter was like saying to me today, she's like, Daddy, she's 6 years old. She's like, Daddy, why do you have to go work? And I said, well, because we actually made this thing up called a job. We actually made it up. It's like, and then we made this thing up money. We actually completely just made that stuff up. And it's just all just made up. And we've made it so serious that, you know, if you don't have the money, you could die. But it was all made up.
This is my struggle. This is the struggle that we have. And we are stuck in the thick of it. But as Lee just said now, we're slowly but surely starting to wake up. We're starting to realize certain things. And this kind of thing, the Gospel of Thomas certainly points in that direction. It's a wonderfully refreshing way of looking at what we've had for the past 2,000 years and maybe not properly understood. Yeah.
There we go. So that's
I've
how
got a
we're
massive
going to
headache now.
wake up the zombies.
Damn it!
But you're quite right. It's insightful. We are the fallen. You're quite right. Correct observation.
But we're going to get out of here, Lee. We just need to understand that Gospel of Thomas, and then we're out, bro. I have to go meditate on that.
So
May it be that easy.
man.
I think it requires a little bit more commitment, etc. Oh.
No, but that's great. I hope we wake up some more zombies with this podcast.
Maybe do so.
Yeah, Father, it's always fantastic to talk to you. Seriously, it's like
It's so
I always
amazing.
look forward to talking to you because I mean, you know your stuff like one way, and I just wish.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to come onto your podcast. Really, what a pleasure to be invited. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll chat to you again soon about the other Gnostic Gospels, especially.
Yeah, and we must do a podcast on Gnosticism, what it is. I mean, I've got a vague understanding of it, but you know, it would be great to have it.
Yeah,
it's a very good idea. Maybe in a month or so we'll do that.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, awesome.
Okay. Thank you, man. Have a fantastic
Gentlemen,
weekend.
have a very pleasant evening. Thank you very much.
You too.
Cheers, Father.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Bye.
Yes, I've got such a headache, dude. Fuck.
Because you were just
No, I'm
zombified.
like so freaking annoyed, dude. But anyway, I've just come to a realization. Fuck. But anyway, it was fantastic. Seriously, Father Damon is like just the.
No, it's the best.
Yeah, he is. He's like so good with what he talks about, eh? And he knows his stuff. Eh? It's not even like he having to read anything. He knows his stuff like it's like he's been initiated.
Yeah, sure he has.
Anyway, guys and girls from around, I'm so this podcast was great for me, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. And please like and subscribe to our channel. And we'll see you next week. Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Thanks, Will.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Lee. Cheers, buddy.